Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life Story 999. Today, we bring you an emotional journey of sacrifice, love, and resilience that will surely tug at your heartstrings. Esther is a devoted mother who, through unwavering strength, has shaped her son's future. How far would you go for the people you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Esther's story is one of quiet bravery and perseverance. From the moment she found out she was pregnant, she knew that raising her child would be a challenge, but she was ready to face whatever life threw at her. When her husband tragically passed away before she could even hold her newborn son, her life took a hard turn. Alone, without a partner, she found herself not only grieving but also needing to be strong for the little one she carried. It was her strength that would allow her son, Jeremiah, to thrive. Each day in Esther's life was a testament to her resilience. She made her living by selling homemade sweets on the bustling streets of Houston, where every sunrise brought another long day of work. Her days were filled with early mornings and late nights, the scent of caramel and chocolate filling the air as she prepared her sweets. It wasn't easy. The sun bore down on her, and the competition on the streets was fierce. But she never complained. She worked because she had a dream that her son, Jeremiah, would never know the kind of hardship she endured. To Jeremiah, his mother was more than just a parent. She was a beacon of hope, his protector, and the driving force behind all his ambitions. She was there through every scraped knee, every tear, and every victory. Despite their poverty, Esther ensured that Jeremiah never lacked love or encouragement. She understood that education was the ticket to a better life, and she pushed Jeremiah to study, reminding him that the classroom was his battlefield, where he could win their future. "Mom, let me help you today," Jeremiah often asked, seeing his mother return home exhausted but still smiling. He wanted to take away some of her burden, to give her a moment of rest. But Esther, always with her gentle smile, would say, "No, my son, you must focus on your studies. That is how you can truly help me." Her eyes, filled with love and determination, conveyed her belief in him. Through Esther's sacrifices, Jeremiah earned a scholarship to attend an elite private school. This was Esther's dream taking flight, a chance for Jeremiah to break the cycle of poverty and build a better future. Though Jeremiah excelled academically, fitting in with his classmates proved difficult. Surrounded by wealth and privilege, he often found himself the target of teasing. "Why do you still use that old phone, Jeremiah?" Miles, a wealthy classmate, would sneer, his voice dripping with condescension. Jeremiah, however, stood tall, refusing to let their mockery diminish his sense of self-worth. Jeremiah knew that his mother's sacrifices were far more valuable than anything his classmates could comprehend. Every old phone, every worn-out tablet was a reminder of how far he had come, of his mother's unbreakable spirit and the love that fueled his journey. It wasn't about the material things. It was about making each of Esther's sacrifices count, about creating a future where her sacrifices would transform into something extraordinary. This story is a powerful reminder of the incredible sacrifices that parents make for their children. Esther's love and resilience are a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Join us in celebrating her journey, and stay tuned as we explore the incredible challenges and triumphs that lie ahead for Esther and Jeremiah. Their story is one of courage, determination, and the unwavering bond between a mother and her child. Stick around. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
One particularly sunny afternoon, Miles and Wyatt, two of Jeremiah's most relentless classmates, decided to test Jeremiah's patience once again. They approached him during a break, their sneering smiles betraying the malice behind their seemingly casual question. "Why do you never talk about your family, Jeremiah? Are they embarrassed about you or something?" Miles asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His eyes gleamed with the delight of knowing his words could hurt. Jeremiah, however, had learned to stay calm in moments like these. He kept his expression neutral, meeting Miles' gaze without flinching. "What my family does is no one's business," he replied firmly. Jeremiah had grown used to these moments when he felt like an outsider because he didn't fit into the world of privilege and excess that surrounded him. Despite their efforts to provoke him, Jeremiah was determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing him falter. Miles and Wyatt, unlike Jeremiah, had never known the meaning of hardship. They lived in luxury, and everything they wanted came easily. They were used to being at the top of the social ladder, and Jeremiah's presence in their school, a scholarship student with none of the luxuries they enjoyed, was a challenge to their sense of superiority. His academic success only made it worse. How could a boy from such a modest background consistently outperform them? It was an offense they couldn't forgive, and their interest in Jeremiah was driven by a need to put him in his place. That same afternoon, Esther was at her usual spot, selling sweets from her small, makeshift stall. It was a good day, the sun was shining, and the streets were busy. She greeted passers-by with her usual warm smile, her heart filled with hope that today would be a good day for sales. Suddenly, she noticed two young men in school uniforms approaching her. "Good afternoon," she greeted them with her kind and genuine smile. "Would you like to try one of my sweets? They're made with care." The two boys, Miles and Wyatt, exchanged glances, a smirk forming on their faces. Miles stepped forward, looking at the sweets with disdain. "Do you really think selling these will get you anywhere in life?" he asked, his voice filled with mockery. Esther could hear the cruelty in his tone, but she kept her smile steady. Before she could respond, Wyatt chimed in, "Yeah, maybe you should be begging instead of trying to sell this junk." Esther recognized their uniforms instantly. They attended the same school as her son, Jeremiah. She felt a pang of pain at their words. She knew these boys were Jeremiah's classmates, and the thought of them being so cruel to anyone, let alone to her, hurt deeply. But Esther refused to show her pain. She looked at the boys calmly, her voice steady as she replied, "We all have our struggles, young men. I hope that one day you will understand the value of hard work and the importance of respecting others." The boys were taken aback by her composure. They had expected her to react, to become angry or defensive. Instead, she had answered them with dignity, something they weren't prepared for. They laughed awkwardly, unable to think of anything else to say, before turning and walking away. Esther watched them go, her heart heavy but her resolve unbroken. She refused to let their cruelty define her or shake her determination. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jeremiah arrived to help his mother pack up her stall. He noticed a sadness in her eyes that she tried to hide behind her smile. As they worked, Esther couldn't hold back her concern any longer. "Jeremiah," she began, her voice gentle but worried, "have you faced any trouble at school lately?" She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. Jeremiah hesitated, a flood of memories flashing through his mind. Miles' taunts, Wyatt's mocking laughter, the moments when he felt utterly alone among his peers. He saw the worry in his mother's eyes, and he couldn't bear the thought of adding to her burdens. She already did so much for him, worked so hard just to keep them going. He forced a smile, shaking his head. "No, Mom. Everything is fine," he lied, his voice steady though his heart ached with the weight of the truth he couldn't share. Esther watched him, her heart heavy with worry. She knew her son, knew that he was holding something back. But she also knew that he was trying to protect her, just as she had always protected him. She nodded, deciding not to press further for now. "All right, my son," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Just remember, you can tell me anything. We'll face it together, whatever it is." Jeremiah nodded, the forced smile still on his lips as they finished packing up. That night, as they sat together over their simple dinner, both mother and son were lost in their thoughts. Esther couldn't help but worry about the challenges Jeremiah faced in a world that often judged people by their wealth instead of their character. Jeremiah, on the other hand, was thinking about how he could make his mother proud, how he could rise above the taunts and prove that they were stronger than the cruelty thrown at them. This chapter of Esther and Jeremiah's story shows us the harsh reality of facing humiliation, but also the strength it takes to stand tall in the face of it. Esther's dignity and Jeremiah's resilience remind us that, no matter how others try to bring us down, we can choose to rise above it. Stay with us as we continue to follow their journey, a journey that will show us just how powerful love, sacrifice, and determination can be in overcoming adversity. The day of Jeremiah's graduation finally arrived. It was a day that marked the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifices, and dreams. Esther couldn't have been prouder. She had saved for months, forgoing small luxuries and working late into the night, just to buy herself a simple yet elegant white lace dress and a pair of modest high-heeled shoes for this special occasion. This was her day to shine just as much as it was Jeremiah's. For the first time in her life, She even visited a local beauty salon to get her hair and makeup done, something she had never dared to do before. She wanted to look her very best for her son. As she admired herself in the mirror, Esther couldn't help but smile. For once, she allowed herself to feel beautiful, to feel that all her struggles had been worth it. Today, she was not just a street vendor, she was the proud mother of a graduate. The excitement bubbled inside her as she imagined seeing her son on stage, receiving his diploma. But life, as always, had other plans. Esther walked towards the graduation venue, her heart filled with pride and anticipation. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was filled with the buzz of celebration. She could see families gathering, friends taking pictures, and graduates in their caps and gowns. But just as she approached the entrance, she heard a voice that made her heart sink. "Well, look at you," came a sneering voice. She turned to see Miles and Wyatt, two boys she recognized all too well. They were Jeremiah's classmates, and she had encountered them before, though never in such an ugly way. Miles smirked, his eyes filled with malice. "Who did you steal that dress from?" he taunted, his voice echoing with cruelty. Esther barely had time to process his words before Wyatt, with a grin on his face, kicked over a bucket of mud that had been left by workers repairing the road. The thick, dirty water splashed all over Esther, soaking her dress and ruining her carefully styled hair. She slipped, landing in the puddle, her heart breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the laughter of the boys. Her heart ached, not just from the humiliation but from the realization that there were people in the world who could be so needlessly cruel. Miles leaned in closer, his smirk widening. "Because people like you should know your place," he said coldly before he and Wyatt walked away, their laughter ringing in her ears. Esther sat there for a moment, covered in mud, her hands trembling. She felt a deep sense of helplessness, the kind she had fought so hard against all her life. But as she sat there, she thought of Jeremiah, her son, who had worked so hard to make it to this day. She thought of his smile, his determination, and all the sacrifices they had made together to get to this point. Determined not to let the actions of two cruel boys ruin this precious moment, Esther picked herself up. She wiped away her tears, ignoring the looks from passers-by. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and began to walk again, each step filled with purpose. She wasn't going to let anything stop her from seeing her son on his big day. When she arrived at the graduation venue, Esther found a seat at the very back, hoping to go unnoticed. She kept her head down, her heart pounding as she watched the ceremony unfold. She felt the stares of those around her, heard the murmurs, but she kept her focus on the stage, waiting for the moment when her son would appear. As Jeremiah took the stage to deliver his speech, he looked out into the crowd, searching for the one face that mattered the most to him. His eyes scanned row after row, and finally they landed on her, his mother, sitting quietly at the back, her dress stained with mud, her eyes red from tears. His heart sank at the sight. He could see the exhaustion, the pain she was trying to hide, and he knew instantly that something terrible had happened. Jeremiah's prepared speech was forgotten in that moment. The words he had carefully written and rehearsed no longer seemed important. He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving his mother, and began to speak from his heart. "Good afternoon, everyone," he started, his voice strong but filled with emotion. "Today, I was supposed to talk about the importance of perseverance, about the challenges we've overcome to get to this point. But standing here, looking out at all of you, there's only one person I want to talk about. My mother." The audience fell silent, their attention fully on Jeremiah as he continued. "My mother, Esther, is the reason I am standing here today. She is the strongest, most selfless person I know. She has worked tirelessly, day and night, selling sweets on the streets, just so I could have the chance to be here. She sacrificed everything, her comfort, her dreams, her own happiness, to give me a better life. And today, she came here to see me graduate, dressed in her best, only to be humiliated by people who think they are better than her." Gasps filled the auditorium as Jeremiah's words sank in. He pointed to the back of the room, his voice unwavering. "There she is, sitting in the back, covered in mud because some people think it's acceptable to tear others down. But let me tell you something. My mother is not ashamed, and neither am I. She is my hero, and I am proud to be her son." Esther's eyes filled with tears as she listened to her son's words. She had always known he was strong, but in that moment, she realized just how much he had grown, how much he understood the value of everything they had fought for together. The audience erupted in applause, a standing ovation that echoed through the hall. People turned to look at Esther, their eyes filled with admiration and respect. Jeremiah stepped away from the podium and walked down the stage, his eyes locked on his mother. He made his way through the crowd, each step purposeful, until he reached her. He extended his hand, his eyes filled with love. "Come with me, Mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly. Esther hesitated for a moment, but then she took his hand, allowing him to lead her to the stage. Together, they stood before the crowd, mother and son, side by side. Jeremiah looked out at the audience, his arm wrapped around his mother's shoulders. "This is what true strength looks like," he said, his voice filled with pride. "It isn't about how much money you have, or how fancy your clothes are. It's about love, sacrifice, and the courage to keep going, no matter what. My mother is the embodiment of strength, and I hope that one day I can be half as strong as she is." The applause was deafening, and for the first time that day, Esther allowed herself to truly smile. She looked at her son, her heart overflowing with love and pride. This was their moment, one that no amount of cruelty could take away from them. Jeremiah stood at the podium, the words he had carefully prepared suddenly feeling meaningless compared to what was in his heart. He looked out at the audience, the bright lights almost blinding him, but he knew what he had to say. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding, and began. "Good evening, everyone. I had a speech prepared for today, but something happened that I can't ignore. Today, I want to talk about my mother, the woman sitting at the back of this room, covered in mud because two of my classmates thought it was funny to humiliate her." The crowd fell silent, their eyes following his gesture toward the back of the room, where Esther sat. Her dress was stained, her hair disheveled, but her spirit was unbroken. Jeremiah's voice grew stronger as he continued, his emotions evident but his words unwavering. "My mother is the strongest person I know. She raised me alone, working day and night, selling sweets on the streets so that I could stand here today. She is the reason I have made it this far. And today, she was humiliated for simply trying to be here for me." His words hung in the air, resonating with every person in the audience. It was as if the very walls of the auditorium held their breath. Jeremiah took another deep breath, turning his gaze toward Miles and Wyatt, two boys who now sat pale-faced, their earlier arrogance replaced by a look of shame. "Miles and Wyatt," he said, his voice steady, "you tried to make my mother feel small. But let me tell you something. Nothing you say or do could ever diminish her worth. She is my hero, and I am proud to be her son." The auditorium erupted into applause, a standing ovation that seemed to echo endlessly. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, many with tears streaming down their faces. They looked toward Esther, their eyes now filled with admiration and respect. It was a moment that transcended the usual ceremony, a moment that spoke of courage, love, and the strength it takes to fight for what truly matters. Esther sat in her chair, tears streaming down her cheeks, but not from sadness. These were tears of pride, of knowing that every sacrifice she had made, every sleepless night, every struggle, had not been in vain. Her son was standing before an audience, not only as a graduate but as a young man who understood the true value of love and dignity. Jeremiah looked back at his mother, his eyes filled with love. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "everything I am, everything I will ever be, is because of you. You showed me what true strength looks like. You taught me that no matter how hard life gets, we keep going. Today, I want everyone here to know that I am proud, so incredibly proud, to be your son." As the applause continued, Jeremiah stepped away from the podium, walking down the steps of the stage and making his way through the crowd. He didn't stop until he reached his mother. He extended his hand, his eyes filled with emotion. "Come with me, Mom," he said softly. Esther hesitated for a moment, overwhelmed by the attention, but then she took her son's hand, allowing him to lead her to the stage. The audience watched as mother and son stood together, side by side. Jeremiah wrapped his arm around his mother's shoulders, holding her close. He looked out at the crowd, his voice once again steady as he spoke. "This is my mother. She is the embodiment of strength, sacrifice, and love. She is the reason I am here today, and I hope that one day I can be half as strong as she is." The crowd roared with applause once more, a wave of admiration and respect washing over the room. In that moment, it wasn't just about graduation, it was about recognizing the sacrifices that often go unnoticed, about honoring the people who lift us up when we need it most. Jeremiah's speech was more than just words. It was a tribute to the quiet heroes, the ones who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, expecting nothing in return. Esther stood on that stage, her heart swelling with pride as she looked at her son. She had always known he was special, but in that moment, she saw the man he had become, a man who was not only intelligent and hard-working but also kind, compassionate, and brave. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had. After a few moments, Jeremiah led his mother back down from the stage, the applause still echoing in their ears. As they made their way back to their seats, people reached out to shake Esther's hand, to offer words of support and admiration. "You raised a wonderful young man," one woman said, her eyes filled with tears. Esther smiled, her heart full, as she thanked each person. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a newfound sense of unity, of understanding. People whispered to one another, not about the incident that had happened earlier, but about the incredible bond between Esther and Jeremiah. They spoke of the power of love, of the strength it takes to stand up for what is right. Miles and Wyatt sat in silence, their faces flushed with embarrassment. They had come to the ceremony expecting to celebrate their own achievements, but instead, they were faced with the consequences of their actions. As they watched Jeremiah and his mother, they couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. They had tried to belittle someone who was stronger than they could ever understand, and now they were left to face the reality of their choices. As the ceremony came to a close, Jeremiah and Esther walked out of the auditorium hand in hand. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the scene. Jeremiah looked at his mother, his heart full of gratitude. "Mom, thank you for everything," he said softly. Esther smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "No, my son," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for making everything worth it." They stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but they had made it. Together, they had faced every obstacle, and together, they had triumphed. It wasn't just a graduation, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one that they would write together, hand in hand. The impact of Jeremiah's speech was immediate and far-reaching. Miles and Wyatt's families were mortified, their son's actions now laid bare for all to see. What should have been a proud day of celebration had turned into a day of deep reflection and shame. The school launched an official investigation into the incident, and within days, both boys were suspended. Their parents, grappling with a mix of anger, disappointment, and embarrassment, knew that this was a pivotal moment in their sons' lives, a moment that demanded change. Ashamed of their son's behavior, Miles and Wyatt's parents made a decision. Their boys needed to learn about respect, empathy, and the realities of life beyond their comfortable existence. And so, they arranged for both of them to volunteer at a local shelter for the next 6 months, where they would work with people far less fortunate than themselves. It was not a punishment meant to break them, but a chance for growth, a chance to understand that the world was bigger than their privileged bubble. On their first day at the shelter, Miles and Wyatt were visibly uncomfortable. They were used to a life of convenience and ease, and the reality of the shelter was starkly different. They were assigned tasks that ranged from cleaning and organizing donations to serving meals and listening to the stories of the people who came through the doors. The first few days were hard, filled with awkward silences and uncertain glances. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks, something began to change. Miles found himself sitting with an elderly man who shared stories about his past, stories of hardship, of losing everything but finding hope again. Wyatt met a young boy who reminded him of his younger brother, a boy who was homeless but still managed to smile and dream of a better future. The arrogance and superiority that had once defined them began to melt away, replaced by a growing sense of empathy and understanding. They started to realize that the people they were helping had stories, struggles, and dreams just like anyone else. Back in Houston, the response to Jeremiah's speech had been overwhelmingly positive. Esther and Jeremiah received an outpouring of support from people across the community. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers reached out to offer words of encouragement and support. Local news stations picked up the story, sharing the powerful moment between mother and son, and soon Esther's sweets became famous throughout the city. People flocked to buy her sweets, not just because they were delicious, but because they wanted to support a woman who had shown such strength and resilience. With the help of some generous donations from well-wishers, Esther was finally able to make a dream come true. She opened her own small bakery. It was a cozy little shop, filled with the scent of freshly baked goods, and it quickly became a beloved spot in the neighborhood. The bakery was more than just a business to Esther. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for, every sleepless night, every sacrifice she had made for her son. And it was a place where she could share her story, her love for baking, and her gratitude with everyone who walked through the door. She named it Esther Sweets, a simple name that carried with it the weight of her journey and the love she poured into every treat she made. Jeremiah helped his mother at the bakery whenever he could, and the two of them worked side by side, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced humiliation, heartbreak, and challenges that would have broken many. But instead, they had risen above it, transforming pain into purpose, and using their experience to build something beautiful. Miles and Wyatt, too, were changing. The months they spent at the shelter had opened their eyes to a world they had never truly seen before. They began to understand the value of kindness, humility, and the importance of treating others with respect. One afternoon, as they were nearing the end of their volunteer commitment, Miles turned to Wyatt, his voice quieter than usual. "We really messed up," he said, his eyes filled with regret. Wyatt nodded, the weight of their actions finally settling in. "Yeah, we did. But maybe we can make it right." The boys knew what they had to do. They reached out to Jeremiah, asking if they could meet with him and his mother. It took courage, and they were nervous, unsure if they would even be granted the chance. But Jeremiah, seeing the sincerity in their request, agreed. The meeting took place at the bakery, Esther's Sweets, a place that had become a symbol of resilience and hope. When Miles and Wyatt walked in, they were greeted by the warm aroma of freshly baked bread and the sight of Esther behind the counter. She looked up, her eyes meeting theirs, and for a moment there was silence. Miles cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly. "Mrs. Esther, we came here today to apologize. We know what we did was wrong, and we are truly, deeply sorry. We can't change what happened, but we want to make it right." Wyatt stepped forward, his eyes filled with remorse. "We've learned a lot over the past few months. About respect, about kindness, about how much words and actions can hurt. We just hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive us." Esther looked at the two boys, her expression softening as she listened to their heartfelt apology. She took a deep breath, her voice gentle but firm. "What you did was hurtful, not just to me but to my son. It took a lot for us to move past that day. But I believe that people can change, and I can see that you both have learned something important. I forgive you." The relief on Miles and Wyatt's faces was evident, and they thanked her, their voices filled with gratitude. It was a moment of closure, a moment that marked the beginning of something new, not just for them, but for Esther and Jeremiah as well. The story of Esther, Jeremiah, Miles, and Wyatt is a reminder that every action has consequences, but it is also a reminder that people have the capacity to change. It shows us that even in the face of humiliation and pain, we can find strength, we can grow, and we can build something beautiful out of the ashes of our struggles. Months had passed since that fateful day at the graduation, and life had taken a new direction for everyone involved. Esther's Bakery, now a beloved local spot, had flourished. The sweet aroma of freshly baked goods filled the air, and the laughter of customers brought warmth to the shop. It had become a place of comfort, hope, and fresh starts, much like the journey Esther and her son, Jeremiah, had taken. One crisp afternoon, the bell above the bakery door chimed, signaling the arrival of new customers. Esther looked up from the counter, her smile fading slightly as she saw who had just walked in. It was Miles and Wyatt. They looked different, not the arrogant boys who had once humiliated her, but two young men who carried themselves with humility, their eyes reflecting the weight of what they had done. Miles took a hesitant step forward, his gaze meeting Esther's. "Mrs. Esther," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "we came here today to apologize." He paused, swallowing hard, trying to find the right words. "We were wrong, terribly wrong, and we are truly sorry for what we did." Wyatt nodded, his expression sincere, his eyes filled with regret. "We know we can't undo what happened," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "but we want you to know that we've learned from our mistakes. We want to make it right, if you'll let us." Esther looked at the two boys standing before her. She could see the fear in their eyes, the fear that they might not be forgiven, that their past actions might forever define who they were. She took a deep breath, her heart softening as she listened to their words. She had never imagined this moment, that the boys who had caused her so much pain would come seeking forgiveness. For a few moments, there was silence. The only sound was the gentle hum of the bakery, the clinking of cups, the chatter of customers in the background. Esther looked at Miles and Wyatt, seeing them not as the boys who had hurt her, but as two young men who were trying to change. She thought of all the time she had wished for a chance, for a second chance at life, at happiness, at everything she had lost. How could she deny that to someone else? "What you did was hurtful," she said finally, her voice steady, but with a hint of emotion. "Not just to me, but to my son. It took a lot for us to move past that day. But I believe in second chances. If you truly want to change, then I forgive you." The weight of her words hung in the air, and for a moment it felt as though time had stopped. Miles' eyes welled with tears, and he blinked rapidly, trying to keep them from falling. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. Wyatt, too, was overcome with emotion, his eyes glistening as he spoke. "Thank you, Mrs. Esther. You have no idea what this means to us." Esther nodded, her heart filled with a mix of emotions, relief, hope, and even a sense of closure. In forgiving them, she felt a burden lift from her own shoulders. It wasn't just about them, it was about her, too. It was about letting go of the pain they had caused, about finding peace within herself. It was about the strength it took to forgive, and the courage it took to open her heart once more. Jeremiah, who had been working in the back, stepped into the room just in time to witness the exchange. He watched as his mother extended her hand, shaking hands with Miles and Wyatt. He could see the sincerity in their faces, the gratitude, and he felt his own heart swell with pride. His mother had always been his hero, but today she had shown him what true strength really looked like. "If you want to make things right," Esther continued, her voice softening, "then use this as a lesson. Treat others with kindness, with respect. Remember that your actions have consequences, and that every person deserves to be treated with dignity." Miles and Wyatt nodded eagerly, their expressions earnest. They understood now what they had failed to see before, that their actions had a profound impact on others, and that they had the power to choose who they wanted to be. The conversation ended with a sense of resolution, a sense that something broken had begun to heal. Miles and Wyatt left the bakery that day, their hearts lighter, knowing they had been given a chance to become better people. They had come seeking forgiveness, and they had found it, not just from Esther, but from themselves as well. It was a moment of redemption, a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As they walked out of the bakery, Jeremiah turned to his mother, a smile spreading across his face. "You amaze me every day, Mom," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Esther smiled back at her son, her eyes filled with love. "It's not always easy to forgive," she said, "but sometimes it's the only way to truly move forward." The bakery continued to flourish, and Esther and Jeremiah continued to build their lives, one day at a time. The story of that day, the day Miles and Wyatt came seeking forgiveness, became one that they often shared with their customers. It was a story about the power of change, about the courage it takes to face the past, and the grace it takes to forgive. It was a story that inspired others, a reminder that no matter how far you've fallen, there is always a way to rise again. Jeremiah's journey continued with a bright future ahead of him. With his mother by his side and the lessons of resilience that she had instilled in him, Jeremiah went on to attend a prestigious university. It was the dream Esther had always held close, the one that kept her going on long, difficult days selling sweets on the streets of Houston. As he walked through the gates of the university for the first time, Jeremiah felt the weight of all his mother's sacrifices, and he promised himself that he would make every moment count, not just for himself, but for her as well. University life was a new world for Jeremiah. There were new challenges, new people, and opportunities he had only dreamed of before. He threw himself into his studies, excelling in every subject, and quickly became known for his determination and hard work. But no matter how busy he was, Jeremiah always found time for his mother. He would call her every night, sharing stories about his classes, his professors, and the friends he was making. And Esther, in turn, would tell him about the bakery, how it had grown into a beloved neighborhood spot, a place where people came not just for sweets, but for warmth and community. Esther's bakery had become a true symbol of resilience and love. The cozy shop, with its cheerful atmosphere and the delicious scent of freshly baked treats, had become a cornerstone of the community. Customers came in not only to buy bread and pastries but also to hear Esther's story, a story of sacrifice, hope, and triumph. The bakery was filled with photos of her and Jeremiah, a timeline of their journey that inspired everyone who walked through the door. People would often tell Esther how much her story meant to them, how it gave them hope to face their own challenges. And for Esther, There was no greater reward than knowing that her journey had touched others. The bond between Esther and Jeremiah grew even stronger during this time. They had faced so much together, the loss of a loved one, the challenges of poverty, the cruelty of others, but they had also triumphed together. They had taken every setback, every moment of pain, and used it as fuel to move forward. And now, they were finally seeing the fruits of their labor. Esther often reflected on that day at the graduation, a day that had started with so much humiliation but ended in overwhelming pride. It was a day that marked a turning point, a day when she realized that the true strength of a person isn't measured by how they fall but by how they rise after the fall. Miles and Wyatt, too, had begun their own new journey. After seeking forgiveness from Esther and Jeremiah, they had taken steps to change their lives. They continued to volunteer at the shelter, long after their initial commitment had ended, and found a sense of purpose they had never known before. They began to understand the value of empathy, of giving without expecting anything in return, and it changed them in ways they never thought possible. They had faced their own reckoning, and now they were determined to be better, not just for themselves, but for the people they had hurt. Jeremiah returned home every chance he got, and each time, he marveled at how much the bakery had grown. It had expanded into the shop next door, and there was now a small seating area where people could enjoy their treats with a cup of coffee. Esther had even hired a few employees to help her manage the growing demand. It was more than she had ever dreamed of, and every day she was filled with gratitude, not just for the success, but for the journey that had brought her here. One day, during one of Jeremiah's visits home, he and Esther sat together in the bakery after closing time. The shop was quiet, the smell of freshly baked bread lingering in the air. Jeremiah looked at his mother, his heart filled with pride. "Mom," he said, his voice soft, "look at what you've built. You've created something incredible, not just for us, but for everyone in this community." Esther smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jeremiah. Everything I've done for you. And seeing you chase your dreams, seeing you succeed, that's all I ever wanted." Jeremiah reached across the table, taking his mother's hand in his. "You've always been my inspiration, Mom. And everything I do to make you proud." They sat there for a moment, the love between them unspoken but deeply felt. It was a moment that encapsulated everything they had been through, the sacrifices, the struggles, the triumphs. It was a moment of peace, of gratitude, and of hope for the future. The story of Esther and Jeremiah is a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and resilience. It shows us that no matter how difficult the journey, no matter how many obstacles stand in our way, we have the strength to rise above it. It reminds us that the people who stand by us, who lift us up when we are at our lowest, are the true heroes of our lives. And it teaches us that every ending is just the beginning of something new, something beautiful. Thank you for watching today's story on Life Story 999. If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Jeremiah's place? Have you experienced your own new beginning after a tough time? Your thoughts are important to us, and we'd love to hear from you. If you have a story you'd like to share, feel free to email us. We love sharing stories of hope, resilience, and love. See you in the next video, and remember, every ending is just a new beginning waiting to unfold.